Great. Thank you. So before we get started, just want to welcome everyone to today's Brown Bag, our 8th one of the series, here today with Open Forest Protocol. And before we get started, I wanted to invite Tim to welcome our speakers today, Jeremy and Luke. Jeremy hails from Open Forest Protocol as the head of growth, where he's been working in the sector at the intersection of finance, markets, climate, and startups for almost 2 decades. And we also have Luke, who's our head of product, and he leads the discovery and delivery of products for FP, one of the persons behind the white paper that we'll be speaking about today as well. So let me pass it to welcome, Jeremy and Luke. Thanks for joining us today and making the time as we wrap up the end of the year. We're very excited to have you, and let me invite Tim to provide some opening remarks. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll be super brief. But yeah, really happy to have Jeremy and Luke here today. We're early investor in Open Forest Protocol, really believe in what they're building. They've made a ton of progress really over the past number of years, but specifically the last year or so since we invested. And yeah, just like very much believe that within the voluntary carbon markets, the open, transparent, really data-driven infrastructure that they're building is crucial. And despite, the market we're in now, which is complex to say the least, in the long run, certainly Mercy Corps Ventures, and I think a lot of people around the table believe that the voluntary carbon markets have a huge role to play in a just transition. So wanted to give the floor to Jeremy and Luke. I think there's going to be a lot of questions and appreciate the deck you've put together, anticipating some of those. But yeah, I'll turn it over to you, Jeremy, or Luke, whichever one you want to go first.
Thanks, Tim. Well, happy to kind of kick things off. I just want to say for this presentation, we're really excited to share some of the recent findings and recent developments that we've been through with the recent carbon white paper that we released. The goal of this presentation is to be as least like a sales pitch as possible, and more of a sharing of findings and the sharing of kind of the tools that we've built and the different learnings and insights that we've gained along the way there. So with that being said, I'll kick it off to Jeremy to kind of start out with some of our opening, just a little bit of background on OFP.
Yeah, thanks, Luke. I'm delighted to be here, everybody. Happy to be sharing. I see my role partially as just an evangelist for Open Forest Protocol and to various stakeholders. Today, we're going to be looking at, just sharing the vision. What is it that we're aiming to do with Open Forest Protocol? How are we looking to disrupt the delivery model for credits into the voluntary carbon market? We're going to get into some of the guts of how things work. We're going to do a little bit of a case study and share a brief video from one of our African climate resilience webinars that we held about a month or two ago. And we want to make sure there's plenty of time for Q&A. So we'll do our best to keep it short, and looking forward to your questions. So feel free to drop those in the chat as we go if anything comes up that you want to dig into a little bit later. Great. So we can move on to the next slide. So what is Open Forest Protocol? Let's start with what's the problem that we're iterating on, right? We know that we cannot achieve climate targets without nature. We know that there is a market today for nature. So how do you scale nature, right? Okay, let's just go back to basics. You need a market-based solution. We need essentially to create an incentive structure so that people can find it lucrative to protect and restore nature. The way that that's been brought to market and iterated on has been through the voluntary carbon market, which has largely been dominated by a few players, namely Verra, who issues 75% of the assets into the market. And I don't want to spend any time picking on Verra. I'm sure you've all read the headlines. What I can say about the delivery model today for bringing, essentially creating a credit that represents something, an impact in nature, and then bringing that to market so that that credit can be bought, sold, traded, retired like a financial asset, has suffered from a number of barriers. Those include high upfront costs, lack of accessibility, long time frames, and ultimately the assets become rather opaque, such that it is difficult to actually link the asset to the thing that created it, the actual, let's call it the ton of carbon embedded in a forest somewhere on planet Earth. Open Forest Protocol aims to disrupt this system by simultaneously making this more scalable, more accessible, more open, while also creating a far more transparent credit on the back end. So yes, our core values are inclusivity and accessibility. So Open Forest Protocol opens carbon development, essentially the development of projects within a specific methodology with the aim of creating carbon credits to projects both large and small. In fact, down to a portion of a hectare, right? So that is essentially the size of a backyard project all the way up to the multi-thousand hectare projects as well. We, I would say, also provide accessibility because we eliminate upfront costs to access our measurement, reporting, and verification system, which Luke will explain in some detail as far as the process there. So that's sort of the accessibility angle. Transparency. Every aspect of this delivery chain becomes embedded on a public blockchain such that you all have access to it. The entire world has access to it. It is immutable. It doesn't sort of filter through Open Forest Protocol so that we can make the data look a certain way. It is really, you get to see how the sausage is made, for better or for worse, and every step of the way. So from initial data collection to verification to credit creation, all the way to retirement, that becomes visible to the entire world for a carbon credit. That is a radical transparency that we're bringing to the market. And that's all made possible through the digital innovations of the system that we've created. Integrity. I think Luke will talk quite a bit about this as far as the various safeguards that we have in place for data collection. We have an incredibly robust and I would say unique data verification system that essentially coordinates any potential player within the voluntary carbon market to provide an opinion and an independent analysis on the veracity and truthfulness of data being uploaded to our system, as well as the integrity or say completeness of the data being uploaded to our system, such that only the most comprehensive and truthful data uploads actually achieve verification and move on to issuing carbon credits. And then finally, scalability. Because this is an open system, there are no barriers to access, and because we essentially smart contract most of the activities on the blockchain, we can rapidly scale participation across many, many actors. Currently, we have projects from over 31 countries that are working with us, so location really isn't an issue for us. And then finally, Luke, moving on to the last slide here, just to walk you briefly through the process, and then I'll hand it off to Luke. There's sort of a 5-step process here. We do have a upfront process to verify a project, verify the organization behind it or the people behind it. We have projects led by indigenous groups, by communities, by small-scale project developers, by large-scale project developers. It is a very open and flexible system. We hope to have projects sort of front-run by governments at some point, as well as they look to meet their ecosystem restoration goals. Once a project is verified to be able to participate, that is when they are required to then do their ground truth data collection. We have generated and created a smartphone app. So we know that 80% of the planet has access to a smartphone that they can use to provide the system with regular data uploads, ensuring that they essentially complete all the steps, fill in all the boxes. That data gets collected and then pushed onto a blockchain where it becomes essentially raw, naked, unverified data that is visible to the entire world. Now, this is actually the first major step to avoid poor quality projects, because we found that such a transparent system is a huge disincentive for projects that are poor quality or scammy of some degree. That data being raw and unverified now goes through a verification process where dozens of independent analyses occur on the data, and that those independent analyses roll up to a consensus. If the consensus is the data is solid, it's all good, we're going to verify that, and we're going to essentially run that through our allometric equations, come up with a tonnage of carbon, and generate credits going to the value creation step. Those credits are automatically generated, automatically distributed to the parties that need to receive them, namely the project, which receives 85% of the credits that are created, which is a hard-coded amount that is a much larger percentage than you would typically get if you have to pay a developer, a verification body, to pay the methodology provider. So we believe that through our system, the projects keep a far greater part of the value that they create. 15% is then distributed out to the validators, the open forest network, as well as to a buffer pool, essentially for insurance in case a project does get cut down or burns down, et cetera. Finally, everything that I just described becomes immutably tagged onto the blockchain. It's visible through our website. If you go to openforestprotocol.org, you click on View Atlas. The Open Forest Atlas provides all of this information in real time. Again, immutable, accessible to the world. So that's a very high-level overview. Luke, the creator of many of these products, is going to dive a little bit deeper into how they work and what they do.
Thanks so much, Jeremy. Yeah, I think from a product perspective, what we tried to do initially was understand what are the core needs and problems for people on the ground that are managing or developing forest projects globally. Transparency is a huge one. Bringing transparency to the tree planting processes and to the development of these projects was by far the biggest need for both the projects on the ground as well as for the investors, either providing direct or purchasing carbon credits from these types of projects. So that was sort of one of the main problems and jobs that we wanted to set out to solve. So we've done that through a variety of ways. And another key need was to make sure that any tools that we developed were really accessible to anybody around the world. That was kind of why we centered around mobile app development and integrating a mobile app into a larger software-based, network-based management program that enables projects to manage their projects digitally on their computer and then send people out into the field to record tree data using a mobile app. As you can see here, so this is a great project of ours that's based in Guatemala. They went out into the jungle to collect this data. One of our team members went with them. So you can see on the left-hand side there, the web app that we have. So this is kind of the main hub, the main point of contact where you go in, you create an instance of your project, you manage the people that are involved in monitoring for your project, and you also submit all of your data to the blockchain for verification through that product. And then a separate product that we've developed as well is a mobile app that's much more flexible. It's extremely intuitive and easy to use. It requires a very low level of technological or even written literacy. It's very straightforward. You take photos of trees in a statistically significant number of sampling plots within the project that you can see there with the S1, S2. Those are the sample plots within the project that they're actually physically monitoring. We also have geofenced project data, so you're not able to record photos outside of the project area up to a certain limit. And then some other features that I'm happy to clarify if anybody has any questions. But we also have, going in this theme of transparency, this product, it's our Atlas. This is essentially really a window into everything that's happening on the blockchain. Blockchain is a phenomenal tool. We try to hide it as much as possible in the things that we're doing because of various implications and various degrees of complexity. But ultimately, it's a really, really powerful database tool for storing data in a transparent and secure way. Once you put data on a blockchain, everybody can see that, and you cannot edit it or tamper with it after it's on the blockchain and approved there. So that's a really powerful tool. What we're doing with this product is essentially providing a window into that information. We're just taking all the data from the blockchain directly and putting it on this interface. And so everything that you see that's happening within a project is displayed here. So you can see these projects evolve over time. You can see the photos of trees from the very first stage of their project, the very first instance in which they go out into the field to collect data. And you can see those trees grow as the project goes along. We also track different metrics, such as how many carbon credits were generated, things like that. So we have a variety of other products, but without getting too into it, I'll keep on moving. So this is a wonderful, and you'll have to tell me if we do not get any audio from this, but this is a wonderful little overview of a webinar that we had a while back that we did not anticipate to have such wonderful feedback. But this is I think it'll bring things more concrete, show you what's actually happening on the ground with many of the projects that we're working with, and really, I hope, paint a clear picture in your mind in terms of what it is that we're actually doing here. So I will go ahead and play this. Please let me know if the audio is weird or not happening. Do we see my screen here?
We see your screen, but the audio is not coming through. I think you need to pick the selection on the preferences when you're sharing.
How's that?
No audio that I hear.
When I hear carbon, I hear hope for them. It's a way also of giving women and young farmers new ways of maximizing the wood they have, instead of cutting them, and when they know that they are going to have a financial benefit by keeping the trees, by planting more trees, by taking care of these trees. That's also a hope. That's hope for them. That's also a way of addressing deforestation, a way of addressing desertification, and in a nutshell, climate change as well.
Hi, I'm Rob Barber. I'm the founder and director of Kisampa Conservancy, a 3,000 hectare community conservancy in the village of Matapuli, bordering Sadani National Park in coastal Tanzania.
My name is Rokiato Traore. I'm from Mali. I'm the founder of Hero Alliance, a company that develops an inclusive value chain around agroforestry products such as Moringa for economic, environmental, and social impacts.
Muslim model here from Horizon Business Venture. Our project aims to create farmland products to farming landscapes using original native species. We target smallholder farmers in both Laikipia and Nyeri counties.
I'm called Ewi Lama, and I am from Limbe, Cameroon. I am an environmental and climate justice advocate and was recognized as UN Global Climate Ambassador last year at COP27. I am also the director of Voices for Forest Alliance, a community-based organization that works with women and youth on gender, land rights, indigenous rights, and landscape restoration.
Another aspect is that OFP provide another motivation, carbon credit, for farmers to actively engage not only in new tree planting exercise, but preservation of existing forests and tree population.
The final thing is empowering them. We're empowering them by giving them economic tree species that they can be able to plant in their forests, to establish huge nurseries. We've established over 30 nurseries in these communities with women and planted thousands of trees. See that we've been able to reach over 100,000 trees planted in communities around Cameroon. And with OFP, we want to be that come-to organization in Cameroon where people can actually say, okay, this organization was empowered by OFP and they are able to spread their wings across the national territory because of that particular empowerment.
OFP is carbon financing simplified, and we want to be recognized as as pioneer and drivers of this momentum. And OFP will be a big part of it. And basically, I would say that you'll be the one who will be telling us to stop.
In teaching people the methods of actually doing the measuring and the reporting is not a complicated process once they understand it, and it's very, very structured and very, very easy to follow, which is important from a verification perspective. OFP applications and platform has been proven to work for people who have limited IT skills, limited literacy. It is literally that simple.
So I think the thing that I'd like to highlight here, let me make sure that we are sharing the right screen here.
Yep, you're good.
Yep.
Luke, we can see the slide.
Cool, perfect. The thing that I want to really highlight there is that the least impressive aspect of that video is OFP for sure. I think the real magic there is with the organizations that we're working with, and the work that they're doing on the ground, the engagement of the local communities, and the momentum that is moving in the direction of granting economic mobility and providing positive climate impacts to global projects around the world. These are traditionally projects that would have been excluded from the VCM up until this point, whether because of size or various factors. And so what we're able to do and what we've been able to do is create a solution that is, as Rob mentioned, very structured, very easy to use, but still satisfies a lot of the vast majority of the requirements of a good quality, high quality carbon credit. We're able to wrap those qualities, wrap those requirements into an easy to use product that's accessible and very fairly straightforward for global projects around the world. And so that's really the magic of what we've been able to do, is be able to empower these projects to continue to do the work that they're doing on the ground and to have the resources to sustain that type of work. So being mindful of the time, I know we're about almost 20 minutes in now. So I'll do a quick run through the carbon process and our carbon white paper. It's public. You're welcome to read it and provide any feedback. There's a feedback request form, I think on page 3. So please, if you have any interest, please check that out. But I will give a little brief overview of kind of how this process works. So as Jeremy mentioned, the carbon process is very similar to the monitoring procedure that we have in place. Begins with whitelisting. So just general kind of come into the platform, tell us a little bit about your project. We have an automated form for this. Once that project is approved for carbon, and we collect it's a very rigorous form. It's a very, I think there's about 80 or so different questions that are asked there that ask all different types of questions about the project. We can get into the details if anybody has any questions, but essentially once that process is done and the project is approved, we have an analysis of the questions as well as the project.
Go to the next slide, Luke.
Yeah, do you see this general process right now?
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, so yeah, we can do a little bit of this. That's a good suggestion. Thanks, Jeremy. So the whitelisting process, this is also just kind of general applicability for the for any carbon project on OFP. And an important clarification as well is that currently we only have afforestation, reforestation, revegetation projects on OFP. That's the only methodology that we have approved at this point. We're building and integrating more, but that's what we have at the moment. So this is an important clarification, is that this is only applicable to those types of projects, but a lot of these are applicable to many other types of methodologies. So we can dig into that if necessary. But essentially, we have a rigorous assessment process that analyzes the project's additionality, the permanence of the project, the legal compliance with regards to different country rights, land rights, land tenure, things like that, as well as other types of risks to the project. Nature-based solutions are subject to specific risks, and so we evaluate those and make judgments based on that. And then we also have, again, the methodology-specific criteria. So the project duration, the project size, as well as what happened to the land before the project was initiated. So there's a lot of other things here, but as I kind of mentioned and was getting to in the previous slide, once we evaluate the project, and this is complete, then they go through the monitoring procedure that is very prescriptive but thorough, where they collect data on the ground and report that. That is then verified by our distributed group of verification and validation bodies. And once that is all approved, then the assets are created. This is all native on blockchain, so those assets are delivered directly to the account or the wallet of the project that generated them. And then the process repeats. And so we have a regular frequent monitoring procedure. So carbon credits are then being delivered every 12 months or so for the project upon successful verification of the field monitoring data that they submit. So I'll go ahead and pass it off to Jeremy to wrap us up with some case studies to show a little bit more concretely what's happening on the ground.
Yeah, I think in addition to the video, it's just important to kind of zoom back into the human scale of what we do. And just to echo some things that Luke said, when projects participate with Open Forest Protocol, they sign up for a 40-year period of reporting, at least annually. What they get in exchange, or why essentially they have a strong incentive structure to do this reporting, is that every year we will be measuring, based on that data, the delta between what is the biomass content and essentially the carbon content of that reforestation project today versus where was it 12 months ago. Assuming those trees are growing each year, that means annual recurring revenue for the projects. Annual recurring revenue that they had no access to before. Ultimately, that allows them to generate income while drawing carbon out of the air and creating all sorts of localized community benefits. As you saw in the video, some of these projects are mixed agroforestry, so there are harvestable products like we've seen moringa. In Brazil, we've seen acai and other harvestable products. We have some cacao projects as well. I think these are very interesting because they provide, and this is totally allowable, assuming that there's enough native species interspersed into the project as well. Totally allowable within our framework to support essentially two forms of income coming out of a project, a harvestable product, and then a sort of a digitally harvestable carbon credit as well. So Admuku Farm in Tanzania, community-based project, providing employment through the local community. They've already planted 16,000 trees. Like many of our projects, once the revenue begins generating for this project after they've been on the platform for 12 months, and they start getting that ARR, that annual recurring revenue, we assume that they will begin to scale from there. So yeah, just a nice little case study. And again, any of these projects are visible. Luke, we can go to the next slide, through our atlas available on the website. Carlos and Esther is one of my personal favorite projects, one that I bring up a lot in presentations, just outside of Mexico City, probably an hour and a half outside the city center. So this is developed actually through a community-based project developer called Reforest Acción in Mexico. So there are a number of projects on our platform developed by OFP, but essentially led and put in the hands of the landowners themselves, who in this case happened to be Carlos and Esther. This is formerly grazed land that is pretty highly degraded from kind of years of overgrazing that they have decided to essentially return to native forest. There also is, like in many of these projects, some harvestable fruit and forest products as well interspersed, so as to provide more immediate income as well as the long-term recurring revenue income. And this is just an example of another example of a project that is just minuscule. It's tiny. Would never be able to access carbon credits were it not for our platform. Next slide, Luke. So while we have yet to generate our first credit, we anticipate that happening from one of the first projects we onboarded 12 months ago. We'll be generating its credits hopefully in the next 1 to 2 months. We are basing a lot of our calculations on an assumed roughly $40 per credit pricing. We've had these discussions with off-takers. We believe that this is a premium credit. So this is a slightly higher priced credit, but certainly there are plenty of reforestation credits trading at that price. we will obviously make a big splashy announcement once the first credit has been sold. That said, looking at what actually kind of revenue can a project produce over its lifespan for a small, say 10-hectare project, ultimately that can be life-changing money over a 40-year period, and even on an annual basis. Particularly as you're taking these $40 and you're putting it into changing it into economies and into currencies where those dollars can go quite a bit further. So this really is a beautiful sort of digital arbitrage between places in typically the global south where trees tend to grow faster to the buyers, typically corporates, where they want to see these projects happen, but in particularly on this sort of small community scale, what I would call farm to table carbon credits, but really have had no access to seeing how to get these projects organized in any scalable manner. So we're really looking forward to beginning to ship our first payments to projects come next year, and then continue to build on that. We can go to the next slide. Then I think this one's you, Luke, if you want to just wrap it up. You're muted.
Thanks, Jeremy. An important thing also to note on that last slide is the revenue model of OFP. We don't charge anything for the use of the tools or for the initial kind of usage of this protocol. The entire revenue structure is based on a share of the carbon credits generated. So we don't really profit unless the projects do, which is given why they receive about 85% of the carbon credits. So a percentage of those go to the OFP network and also helps pay for the validation and things like that. So can dig into that later, but just wanted to clarify that that's also what we mean by no upfront capital cost, and that really the only capital cost that's necessary for the projects is kind of really just the OpEx, is the ability to go, assuming that they have the trees and the necessary materials to plant them. Really, it's just the monitoring costs and the labor costs of visiting the project physically and taking those photos and measurements on a regular basis. So looking forward here, though, we have some really exciting things that we are planning, some new methodologies that we want to build, new types of environmental assets. We are cracking open the core infrastructure of OFP and enabling what we've built right now, which is a blockchain-based data layer for collecting environmental data and then issuing environmental assets based on that data being verified. We're taking that model and expanding that to other types of things. So that can be anything from a biodiversity credit to other different types of carbon credits. So we're working on integrating new types of data, new types of solutions, and new types of projects onto OFP. And so there's some really exciting things that we can do with this, and some really exciting things that we're presently working on. We're also working on onboarding and reducing the friction of onboarding projects. This means reducing the necessary technological barrier to using OFP, to accessing this type of technology, and to sustaining these projects, as well as localizing a lot of our products and just generally expanding to different localities around the world, particularly in the global south. I think I kind of spoke to new verticals, but also with regards to these carbon methodologies, they are by no means static. They are being continuously improved upon, and they are being improved. And we've received some phenomenal feedback. Overwhelmingly, we've gotten very positive feedback on the methodology that we released, which is great. But there's obviously nothing's perfect. And so we've gotten some fantastic feedback on engagement of local communities and how to further kind of integrate those types of processes within this methodology. We've also seen from various reporting that increasing transparency to payments of local beneficiaries and local communities on the ground are absolutely critical. Increasing the transparency and accountability of those processes is critical. So we're also developing new systems to do that. Thankfully, the technology that we're working with, i.e. blockchain, is really a fantastic tool in facilitating that type of work. So that's kind of where we're going. And I think that's just about it. So big thanks to Jane for organizing this and coordinating and wrangling everybody to get here. Big thanks to the Alliance for having us, as well as BFA Global. So happy to answer any questions you all have and go from here.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Luke and Jeremy. Really great overview. And I'd like to open the floor up to the members for any questions. Feel free to ask them directly or to throw them into the chat.
There's already a question from Tobias. So while people are thinking of their questions, I'm happy to jump in on this one.
Perfect.
And so Tobias from One Acre Fund was asking us to clarify whether these credits are brought through one of the standard certification bodies such as Vera or not. So when we set out to build open forest protocol, that was a key decision point. And quite honestly, we made the call to develop our own methodologies and essentially become our own registry and develop our own standards because of the usability issues that exist in, say, Vera and other methodologies today. Again, not to knock these organizations. They have, I would say, enough on their plates right now already. However, we didn't feel it would be scalable to try to go through those processes. And I can tell you, I speak to many project developers who are, 18 plus months into waiting for Vera to allow them to move forward with their project. So we didn't feel like that was the right move, as Luke said, and actually as Jane shared in the chat, our carbon white paper is available. Essentially, this is our open source methodology for how data gets verified and ultimately how credits in a afforestation, reforestation context get created and certified on our system. This has been, and I think will be continuously improved upon, but also continuously rated by some of the external agencies. I know that Renoster has had some very complimentary things to say about us, which we're very pleased about. Once we begin credit issuance, many of these ratings agencies, they don't rate methodologies so much as they rate individual projects. So we're really looking forward to getting hopefully those AAA ratings and ultimately gaining some of those third-party certifications that come along with the process, such as ICVCM and ICROA.
Another thing to add also, Jeremy, is that when developing our own methodology, we're able to add in additional qualifications and criteria that are missing from other types of methodologies. So there's been some good posts from Renoster on this, but yeah, things like our prescriptive MRV procedures, different types of requirements regarding native species planting, different types of commitments regarding how long the project is going to be, things like that. So we're able to add that in with our own methodology.
Great. Other questions from the audience? I'm trying to stop myself from asking mine and be patient for you to ask. Maybe while remaining, I will just build on some of that questioning regarding the reaction by different stakeholders in the ecosystem to the methodology, right? Because one thing we were hearing at COP, not just in carbon markets, but I think even in other sectors, of this need to coalesce around a set of standards, not because a methodology is better or it has arrived to has converged at what it needs to be, but for the sake of utility, right? For actors to know what are they subscribing to, what do they need to measure up to. And so this need for the industry to coalesce around a methodology or to have some sort of standardization. And so I'm just wondering what the reaction has been from the supply side. You mentioned the projects, communities being excited or projects wanting to take part. What about on the demand side? How have buyers reacted to this? You mentioned briefly about off-takers. So I'm just curious to know, outside of validators or other organizations in this space, what are the signals to your methodology and that being compelling for them to take this approach?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that one, but Luke, feel free to add some flavor. On the buy side, the long-term play that we're looking at is essentially being a wholesale supplier of top quality credits into the market, that digital farm-to-table interface, if you will. With that, we will have an auction mechanism such that marketplaces who are far better than we will be at sort of knowing how to get these credits into the right hands, understanding what any particular buyer needs. Those marketplaces can bid on and then buy and resell the credits from our system. This solves a couple of problems. One, makes it easy for the marketplaces to buy the supply that they need. Two, it ensures that small community-led projects don't have to think about who's going to buy these credits. They simply have the option to toggle to push them to an auction mechanism, and then that efficiently offloads, essentially groups them up with other projects. They can be parsed in any number of ways, from vintage to location to project type, and then essentially sold off in the market, ultimately with the goal of easily getting that value, that fiat currency back into the hands of the project operator. For the time being, we will be interfacing and probably private selling credits on behalf of projects, just with limited volume. We do have a number of corporates that are lined up that are interested. And it seems like some of the players in the industry, I'll name Renoster again, have done a really good job of sort of evangelizing what we're doing and getting that in front of potential buyers as a new form of a premium credit. This being sort of the new kid on the block on a fully digital sort of new thing, we're expecting we're mostly going to be selling to what we'd call the early adopters, but there's certainly a pathway to global recognition, ultimately to becoming a highly sought after credit on the market.
Great. You have more questions coming in, so I just want to ask the second one here regarding the onboarding, right? This project piece. And so I understood for existing projects or existing that maybe the adoption of the OFP methodology and process is easier. But what if for new projects, right, where they haven't necessarily done the evaluation? What's the cost or onboarding process and cost for them?
I would say, Jane, honestly, our projects that we see that have the greatest success and the easiest way of getting onboarded are the ones that have no prior experience in developing projects. Whenever they don't have an organizational structure and a procedural way of doing things, it's very easy to get connected to our very prescriptive monitoring procedures and to get connected in the workflow that's necessary to report information for OFP. So yeah, it's extremely easy and very straightforward. What they essentially need to do is access our dashboard, our website, log in and create an account and an instance of their project, fill out the carbon whitelisting form. This can mostly be done within a day. And then once they're approved, they go to the field and they have to be able to establish the statistically significant number of sampling plots that were calculated in the project creation process. And then monitor those sampling plots according to the monitoring procedures. And these are just standardized, best practices in terms of going out there and measuring trees. So that's essentially all that they need to do, and then be able to repeat that repeatedly. And that's what's required, and that's kind of the simplified version of what currently exists within the VCM in terms of carbon certification and financing.
Right now, I think we're seeing an average time between initial contact to for projects moving forward in earnest to fully onboarded of about 2 months, and I think we can cut that down to even a week as we begin to iterate on our process, get better and integrate better tools to assess projects more quickly. So I would say we're just getting started on that.
Yeah, I was asking the question because I was trying to understand: are they able to bypass that project development assessment period, which we know to be long and costly? It sounds like you're saying yes, and that's what I found surprising. Anyway, but that's another conversation, and let me turn the attention to the ones in the chat. So we have Tim asking a crystal ball question.
Happy to jump in on that one. Good question, Tim. So Tim's asking us to look into our magical OFP crystal ball and describe what the VCM looks like in 2035, and where does OFP play in that 2035 world. This is what I dream about at night. So happy to share. I would say we are on the precipice of a new VCM. I think in 2020 to 2022, we saw some unprecedented growth and then some unprecedented pushback on the integrity of the industry as a whole. What's interesting to note is that this industry, if you follow sort of voluntary carbon market chat on LinkedIn, et cetera, is a lot of chatter for a very small industry, quite frankly, right? We're sort of in the fishbowl looking out, thinking we're in the ocean, and it is, roughly $2.5 billion market. I think the global market for like paper clips is actually bigger. So really, we need to expand the size of the industry, and I think what's going to happen in the VCM as we move from VCM 2.0 to say 3.0 is the monopolistic standards, right? We have one nonprofit that is issuing 75% of assets into the market. Their market share will diminish as new players come in with new technologies. We have all sorts of trickle-down effects with remote sensing, really granular remote sense and spatial data sets that are available. And companies like ours will be saying, hey, there's a better, faster, cheaper way to do things that the existing standards simply can't iterate on, can't move on more quickly because of what I would call an innovator's dilemma. They're kind of stuck in, they've got markets to serve. They're not going to go and disrupt their model, but at the same time, their market share will be slowly eroded and chipped away at by folks who can do things better and serve the market in a more efficient way. So I think 2035, we're going to see more standards. We're going to see higher quality, and hopefully OFP being one of the, I would say, key players in that industry as a digital underpinning. We don't see ourselves as, we're not a project developer, we're a platform. And we want to be a platform that allows multiple methodologies, whether they're developed by the OFP team itself, like our reforestation methodology, or by third parties, even say Verra or Gold Standard, to say, hey, you built a beautiful digital system that took you years and millions of dollars. Why would they reinvent the wheel? Let them essentially develop their own methodology that works through our system, that decentralizes and makes more inclusive the participation and data upload, goes through a better verification process, and issues a more transparent asset on the back end. So that's what we see, is that we become sort of a quiet back end operating system for a better VCM.
Perfect. Jeremy, that's actually a great segue to the question that Brittany was asking about the other methodologies. She's asking your forecasted or expected timeline for MRV processes for carbon sinks, grasslands, soil carbon, mangroves. I know we have talked about that.
Yeah, happy to. No hard estimates right now, but we're actively working on multiple. Grasslands are dear to my heart, being in Texas and with lots of prairies here. But yeah, actively working on a mangrove methodology as well as others. So we'll probably hear some news about it in 2024.
Yeah, maybe just to add to that, it's a great question, because that's really kind of the scale model for open forest protocol, again, being a system on which multiple methodologies live. We are open to, I should be clear, we will be open to third-party development and proposal of their own methodologies that work through our system. We're hoping to be able to open that as soon as possible, hopefully next year, budget depending. But that's certainly something that we are interested in and is part of our growth plan. So, I think that any nature-based methodology works really well with OFP. We'd have to tweak, many of the parameters and the way the data is collected, but like Luke said, we're already working on mangroves, and potentially even some hybrid or non-nature-based methodologies as well. For carbon drawdown, I think anytime you're drawing carbon out of the air and expecting to be paid for it, for the most part, you're going to need a crediting system. So why not choose the more transparent and efficient one? So yeah, that's kind of how we see us growing and maturing over time.
Excellent. Any other questions from the members? Feel free to ask directly, turn on your video, say hello. I take a moment as you're thinking that through and, invite you, Luke and Jeremy, to share any thoughts as we get towards closing, or any asks of the group that you may have. I shared the list of organizations that were here today. I'm not sure all that attended, but you have everyone from within the CarFi collab to the Alliance and our broader network attending today's session. So in the past, speakers have asked for feedback, which sounds like you've been getting some good feedback on the white paper. So if there's any ask to our community, feel free to make that here. And one I'll mention is in our next brown bag that I'm trying to set up is actually with Vera. So it'll be interesting to have this juxtaposition. Brittany, you're raising your hand.
Hi, this was really great. Thank you so much for allowing me to attend. Just, I think, on the transferring the idea to actually being considered by OFP for a project. Can you, I mean, I don't know if there's a presentation you have about how small scale projects can qualify, or if you have any materials that you can share with aid organizations. I'm just curious on that space.
Absolutely, Brittany. I would say the best way is to probably go to our website and to get in contact with us. So that sends a form directly to our project onboarding folks who can send you everything that you need for that. So yeah, there's variety of qualifications, but we're happy to walk you through those, and we do have documentation. I don't have it on hand right now, so yeah, or you can shoot us an email.
Yeah, I just dropped my email in the chat. Feel free to shoot me a message, and we'll get you to the right people and get your questions answered, and hopefully we can start a project together.
Okay, any other questions from you all? And Jeremy and Luke, any asks to our group?
Oh, I'll go first on that one. But thank you all for listening. I hope you're as excited about Open Forest Protocol as I am. I would say, again, our goals are to bring on projects so that we can help transform lives and grow this protocol, get noticed and start to really scale. So if you can play any part of that, if you have a project in mind, like Brittany does, if you have a partnership or alliance in mind, we're always happy to consider this. We've got potential alliances going with right now a few banks in Brazil, which is quite interesting because they are essentially wanting to support their depositors in doing reforestation projects. Open Forest Protocol provides a really nice platform for them to, like, we're the missing piece in them doing that sort of a partnership. So just to call out like how Open Forest Protocol can be used, particularly in cases where there's many sort of fragmented, smaller scale projects, to really bring those all together under a certain financing regime. So we are open to, again, we love to look at your projects. And yeah, finally, I can say we're fundraising. So if there is any interest in hearing more about that, I'm always happy to have a follow-up conversation.
Great, thank you so much. I think you have some contacts. You've made connections with Brittany from USAID, and Tobias is wanting to follow up as well. Definitely have a lot of overlap there. And I think just that we haven't mentioned in this call, but as we were prepping for the session, just in terms of distributions of projects, Jeremy mentioned the 31 countries, but a good percentage of that work is in Africa and in LATAM, which is important for our members as well, if you want to know more about that. And I'll pause here. Just want to thank you so much, Jeremy and Luke, for sharing a really insightful and accessible way of looking at and understanding VCM, and really appreciative of your methodology and the integrity that you bring to making it available to small scale projects, and that very very much resonates with our mission at the CarFi collab level. So, and the CFAR Alliance. And so I just want to thank you for making the time, especially as we're wrapping up the year and everyone's quite busy. So thank you for that. And thank you for all the members for attending, to Tim for bringing